Hey everyone, True Deal Tom here. I received a few comments requesting that I do a video on Nozick, and I thought he was such a crucial author that I would. Also, Emperor Stew, you probably didn't know, but I've been subbed to you for a while, and I don't know, I really hope you get back into making videos, I miss that stuff. Also, before I begin, I have an important announcement to make. The Rational Rise and I will be making an appearance at the Freedman Conference in Sydney, along with Independent Man and many others, where we will be sharing a panel. So, links in the description, grab a ticket, and I hope I'll see some of you there. But anyway, let's get right into it.
Got a thing for you, and I can't let go. My friends wonder.
When it comes to the sentiment that individuals have rights and some things no person can do to them for they would be violating those rights, not many other philosophers can articulate this like Robert Nozick. In his text Anarchy, State and Utopia, the question of how these individual rights can coexist with the state is explored in such a way that libertarianism gained a greater presence in academia than what could be achieved by almost any other author. While Rothbard, Hopper, Rockwell, and others mainly gained the support of students and college radicals, Nozick really hung a question mark over the state in a manner that greatly concerned the mainstream philosophy establishment. The notion that the state is incompatible with individual rights and hence shouldn't force citizens to aid others or to prohibit activities for people in order to preserve their own good or protection will be taught in universities for centuries to come because of Nozick, even if it is often done so through the lens of dissent. Perhaps Nozick's influence was greater than other libertarian authors due to his Lockean conception of social contract theory, thus being a minarchist, arguing for the minimalist state, a position much less radical than the likes of Rothbard and the fellows at the Mises Institute, because most of them were anarchists. However, Nozick's theory of justice and how it is incompatible with modern liberalism is extremely valuable, as well as his criticisms of Marxism, equality, envy, workers' control, and most significantly, the theory of justice put forward by John Rawls, Nozick's intellectual rival, so to speak, as the works of both have already gone down in history as the two most popular competing theories of justice. However, for the purpose of this video, I wanted to focus on Nozick's argument for the minimalist state, or Minarchism, as I thought it is the most persuasive argument that I have heard, and I think his traditional philosophical approach to libertarianism is very much worth entertaining. Something I have always valued about Nozick is his framing of political philosophy, as he insists on a very fair starting point for other ideologies to stem from, because for Nozick, anarchism was a very serious challenge. He believed that the state nor the abhorrence of anarchy could be taken prima facie. Thus he offered anarchism to others as a challenge to overcome while claiming that he was the only one with a solution. I was lucky enough to have a libertarian professor in a first-year political philosophy class, and he framed political philosophy in the same way such as Nozick, where anarchism was the default, and it was the responsibility of others to argue out of it, rather than the other way around. Because after all, if taking somebody's wealth through the threat of punishment is wrong on an individual level, the burden of proof is easily on the person who claims that this somehow stops when adding individuals to the situation. So let's get into it. To understand Nozick's philosophy, we must begin the same way most political philosophies start, with the conception of the state of nature. Nozick begins his text with the question, if the state did not exist, would it be necessary to invent it? Would one be needed, and would it have to be invented? Now, for those who don't know what the state of nature is, it should be explained, for it is crucial to traditional political philosophy. Now, the question of how the state should be organized is preceded by the question of whether there should be a state at all. Hence, this is where political philosophy should start. And if you're an anarchist, it is where it should end also. But to continue, because it is crucial to demonstrate as a state should exist before we make claims as to what it should do, we must also explain what anarchy would be like to see if such a demonstration is even possible. And this fundamental abstract description of a non-state environment that would encompass all situations of interest is called the state of nature, Obviously, the goal of the statist philosopher is to make the state of nature as awful as possible, generalizing across all people in society in order to always make the state a preferable alternative, which, as Nozick points out, is often non-persuasive, as these overgeneralizing pessimistic assumptions about human beings are somehow to not hold true about how the state operates. Thus, Nozick claims that in order to justify the state must be preferable to the most favoured anarchic situation, rather than the worst as has been done under the traditions of Hobbes. Nozick also claims that, in doing so, one must also have a non-political ethical background for their political theories. That is, how people can treat each other must also set the limits for what the state can do. What is morally wrong between private people going about their non-political daily lives does not become right when done in the name of the state. This being a key tenet of individualism, and these are the starting points for Nozick's philosophy, that is, to fully explain the political through the non-political, to derive politics from the state of nature, and to derive the political right from the individual right. What is Nozick's state of nature? How does he go about this task he has laid out for himself? Well, he borrows the state of nature put forward by John Locke, which for the purpose of this video will be briefly described as where individuals are in a state of perfect freedom to order their actions and dispose of their possessions and persons as they think fit, within the bounds of the law of nature, without asking leave or dependency upon the will of any other man. The law of nature stating that no one ought to harm another in his life, health, liberty, or possessions unless they are protecting such things from aggressors in a way that is proportionate to their transgressions. But nonetheless, the laws of nature are the basis for individual rights that Nozick lays out for his philosophy. And this right to non-aggression as described by the law of nature is not just to promote social convenience, it isn't to further social justice, it is the prohibition of certain actions rather than a statement about how people should act. This is often put as the difference between positive and negative rights, and Nozick's philosophy is one of just that, of negative rights. That rights describe what can't be done rather than what should be done. For instance, rights may include the right to live without being coerced by others or threatened with violence or to have one's property infringed on. However, they cannot speak of material entitlements. One does not have a right to material things, especially if they are in the possession of others and need to be redistributed by an authority. And Nozick, in the tradition of Rothbard and individualist anarchists, recognize that there is a difference between the right to defend oneself from aggressors and having the right to the means to defend oneself, as both Nozick and Rothbard would recognize that this is a positive right, as the means to defend oneself is a material possession in itself. This view being fairly different from the other non-anarchist libertarians such as Austin Peterson, who often argues that one has the right to the material conditions that ensure one is protected, things like courts. But of course he is not rigorous like Rothbard or Nozick, so let's continue. Nozick, in the Lockean tradition, believes there are inconveniences with the state of nature, and as an example of this, Nozick claims that natural law may not provide for every contingency in a proper fashion to settle every violation of the law of nature. Nozick writes, quote, that when men judge their own cases, they will always give themselves the benefit of the doubt and assume that they are in the right. They will overestimate the amount of harm or damage they have suffered, and passions will lead them to attempt to punish others more than proportionately and to exact excessive compensation, end quote. Thus Nozick claims private and personal enforcement of one's rights, including those rights that are violated when one is excessively punished, leads to feuds, to an endless series of acts of retaliation and exactions of compensation. So Nozick further says that, in the state of nature, there is no way to end such a dispute and have both parties know it has ended, because tacit agreement between the two would not assure either, as it is only knowing that either party does not feel entitled to compensation or to enact retribution can suffice for stability in this situation, and to know this is extremely difficult. And additionally, one may not be able to protect their rights, being unable to punish transgressors or lacking any means to compensation, perhaps due to facing a stronger aggressor who has violated their rights. However, what is Nozick's solution to this? Well, it's actually much more complicated than to just prop up a state and to call it a day, like we've seen thousands of times said before. So, to continue, Nozick begins with an examination of the possible scenarios when it comes to protection and self-defense in the state of nature in order to find a solution. The first and most obvious being that protection resides in the individual alone, in which a person tries to enact compensation and makes an effort to punish others who aggresses against him or his property. Naturally, this is costly, so people will join with him to repulse attackers. Maybe because they are friends, they are making an exchange, or they all realized that it is more efficient to do this rather than carrying out the task themselves. This would be a mutual protection association. However, of course there cannot be a scenario where all come to the defense of one when facing an attacker. There will have to be a procedure to assure fairness on behalf of the members in this group to prevent two different members in the same group each calling others to come to his aid, or even perhaps if two such members attack each other. In addition, it is far too costly to have every member involved in protection, as time cannot be invested in producing and other things. So, the most viable situation is one where groups hire a designated protection association to act on behalf of them, in order to spend their time on other things. Although, this means that different protective associations will impose different policies at different prices for those who may desire more extensive or elaborate protection, but more significantly, an individual might make more particular arrangements, or even so, some parties might find the legal activities of their association so repellent that they want nothing to do with it. This meaning that members of a said association might get into conflict with non-members in the same geographical area, perhaps members of another different protection association. And additionally, what if such a scenario leads in parties not agreeing to a method of settlement, or not agreeing to which association should have the judiciary on a property dispute? And hence, this is returning to the problem of individuals seeking retribution when they have felt justice hasn't been achieved. The question is raised, will protective agencies in the state of nature require that their clients renounce exercising their right of private retaliation if they have been wronged by non-clients of the agency? An exercise that no association would want to be involved in, only prolonging and worsening the settlement that is not being agreed upon. Hence, competing protection agencies will have to undergo a few possible scenarios. One is the two forces go to a battle and the loser surrenders its patrons to the winner, or one agency has its power centered in one geographical area, the other in another. Each wins the battles fought close to its center of power, with some gradient being established. People who deal with one agency but live under the power of the other either move closer to their own agency's home headquarters or shift their patronage to the other protective agency. However, what if such battles are never solved? What if they continue on, having one side win occasionally and the other win every other time? Well, being private associations, they cannot expropriate their costs onto taxpayers. They exist voluntarily, so they would have a greater interest in cooperation than bearing the costs of frequent dealings and disputes. So, to avoid costly and wasteful battles, the two agencies, perhaps through their executives, will have a peaceful resolution. They would have an interest in setting up a third-party judge or court to which they can turn when their judgments differ, and a settlement cannot otherwise be reached. Or additionally, they could decide upon which agency has jurisdiction under which circumstances. Thus, a system of appeal courts and agreed upon rules about jurisdictions and conflicting laws comes into existence. Though different competing agencies exist, there is one unified federal judicial system of which they are all components. And furthermore, to quote Nozick, in each of these cases, almost all the persons in a geographical area are under some common system that judges between their competing claims and enforces their rights. Out of anarchy, oppressed by spontaneous groups, mutual protection associations, divisions of labour, market pressures, economies of scale, and rational self-interest, there arises something very much resembling a minimal state, or a group of geographically distinct minimal states." End quote. So, Nozick's state is a natural monopoly. That is a monopoly that is a product of the market and not through taxation, redistribution, or artificial barriers imposed by the state. And why would such a natural monopoly occur without intervention from a government? Well, Nozick claims that it is because the protection market, unlike other markets, for the reasons given before, increase in value with the number of consumers who buy it. Although Nozick was writing this in 1970, we today have a very prominent market that operates in the same way, and that is social media. YouTube, Facebook, and etc. have become natural monopolies in a relatively free market due to the utility increasing with each new consumer. This phenomenon in economics is known as network externality. So, moreover, the state of protective agencies is that they cannot coexist, for in competing for customers, they result in violently conflicting with each other. And as the demand for the less than maximal service of associations declines exponentially having network externalities, customers will not easily settle for the lesser goods, unlike in other markets, and competing services will naturally fail. And this natural monopoly on force in an anarchic society is what Nozick refers to as an invisible hand explanation of the state. It is not that Nozick's state is the product of centrally planned distributions and consciously coercing people into submission, but through the unintended consequences of the market. Therefore, Nozick offers his concept of what I would call a market state, a legal monopoly on force that is voluntary with no ruler other than the hierarchy that exists within any other business. And there you have it. I'll probably be uploading more stuff on Nozick in the future, but I thought this would be a good start because there just aren't any real good arguments for Minarchism made by the actual Minarchists these days, like the people in the Libertarian Party, etc, etc. But anyway, remember, check out the Friedman Conference in Sydney. It will be held from the 28th of April to the 30th, so only 18 or so days from now. And I will be speaking there along with some other huge names. Austin Peterson will be there himself, actually, David Leinhelm, and of course Independent Man, so links in the description. I'd love to hang out with some of you guys. Anyway, that being said,